Good morning. We begin this morning with the continuing fallout from the murderous attack on the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Violent protests have broken out in Pakistan, Algeria, Yemen, and Niger, where at least 10 people are dead. Security in Western Europe remains high. In Washington, just after his White House meeting with President Obama, to talk about all this, British Prime Minister David Cameron sat down with us at Blair House, and we asked if the terrorist threat now is greater than ever.
In Britain's history, we've had some very intense times of terrorist threats, so I wouldn't want to try and scale it in that way, but certainly we face a very severe threat. That's what we're calling it, severe, because we believe an attack is highly likely. But frankly, we've been in this struggle against extremist Islamist terrorism now for well over a decade and a half. So we know what it takes to win, but it's going to take a lot of perseverance.
Well, have we entered a new phase here? Is that what this attack in Paris is signal?
This threat keeps morphing because it's the same fundamental problem, extremist Islamist terror. The threat has changed and altered, but it's still based on the fundamental problem of a poisonous death cult narrative, which is the perversion of one of the world's major religions. And that's the thing we're still up against.
The French president says we're at war. Do you call this a war?
Well, it has many of similar aspects, but my way of expressing this is that this is just a huge challenge our society faces. What I don't want to do is try and posit that there's some clash of civilizations going on, because that is what the terrorists want. They want this to be seen as a war between what they see as the true Islam and the rest, and that's not the case. What these terrorists represent is the perversion of a major religion. They're not its true adherents. They are fanatics who've attached themselves to a death cult. And so we don't want to help them in their narrative by saying it's a war of us against them. What it is a bunch of people who've got completely the wrong ideas, who are challenging our society and way of life, and we have to take them on with everything we've got.
Do you leave Washington feeling that we have a coordinated, a coherent strategy to fight these people?
I believe that we do. I think the reason some people are concerned about this strategy is that perhaps we haven't said enough about how long it is going to take to work. If we take the issue of Islamist extremist terrorism coming out of Iraq and Syria, it is going to take a very long time to deal with this, where we'll have to show real perseverance. We cannot do this on our own as Western countries. We need functioning government in Iraq, functioning government in Syria, to be the legitimate authorities that, with us, help to stamp out this perversion of the Islamic religion.
Do you think that the fact that a lot of the West sort of stood back for a while in the early stages of the Syrian war may have set the stage for what we're seeing now?
Well, I would put it a slightly different way, which is I do think that two of the greatest recruiting sergeants for ISIL in Iraq and Syria, one was the fact that there was a very sectarian government in Iraq that was only looking after some of the people. And obviously in Syria you had we still have a brutal regime that has murdered, maimed and bombed so many of its own citizens. I mean, what I would say is what the West now has to do is make sure we're doing what we can to support the legitimate Syrian opposition, an opposition that should be able to represent all of the Syrian people. And in that way, we can undermine both Assad and the narrative on which ISIL depends.
Prime Minister, how is it these people are able to motivate these young people in Britain, young people in France, in the United States? What's the appeal here?
Well, I think they are trying to appeal on the basis of a perversion of the religion of Islam, saying that there is a struggle against one, they would say, Islamic path. I don't believe it is Islamic, but that is what they're saying. One Islamic path against the rest of Islam and against the rest of the world. And they're attracting people, saying they are providing the true path, and it's a clash of civilizations and an epic struggle that people should take part in. Now, we have to demonstrate that this is wrong, that it's a perversion, that it leads to terrorism, death, and division. But we've also got to demonstrate that our values, that the things we stand for and care about in our societies of democracy and free speech and rights and the ability to have peaceful and progressive societies, that those things are stronger. I think we'll be successful because we have history, we have morality, we have the right answers on our side.
The Pope said that freedom of speech has limits, especially in regard to religion, that we shouldn't make fun of other people's religions. How do we find the right balance here?
I think in a free society there is a right to cause offence about someone's religion. I'm a Christian. If someone says something offensive about Jesus, I might find that offensive, but in a free society I don't have a right to sort of wreak my vengeance on them. We have to accept that newspapers, magazines can publish things that are offensive to some as long as it's within the law. That's what we should defend. The politicians, my job is not to tell a newspaper what to publish or what not to publish. My job is to uphold the law, that they can publish things that are within the law.
How do you feel about relations with the United States? You go home feeling better about it, or how do you
I go home feeling that there is an incredibly strong and lasting and special partnership between our two countries. And it's based on the fact that we see the world's challenges in the same way, and we want to work together to solve them. I believe it's helped by the fact that I have a very strong relationship with President Obama, and I admire his leadership and his reasonable approach in dealing with all these issues. But frankly, whether it was Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, or whether it was Churchill and Roosevelt, different relationships have been forged, but the underlying strength of this partnership is there for reasons of not just history, but reasons of values. Well, and that matters as much for the future as the past.
Well, you do seem to get along quite well. How did this relationship develop, do you think?
Well, I got to know him a little bit when he was running for the presidency, and I think we sparked up a good relationship then. We've had a lot of time, whether it's visits to each other's countries or summits or challenges that we've been addressing. And frankly, quite a lot has happened on our watch, whether it is the need to get Afghanistan right and draw down our troops, the huge fight we've had to try and clear up our banking systems and get our economies growing while dealing with our deficits. We've got this huge challenge of Islamic extremism. We've been thrown together in a lot of different situations, and we don't always agree, but what I find is he has a very calm and reasonable, rational, sensible, level-headed way of trying to address these great challenges, and it's been a pleasure to work with him.
You say he calls you bro. What do you call him?
Well, it's normally Barack and David, but every now and again there's been some other things thrown around, and I suppose bro was one of them, but I took that in good heart.
But I mean, you don't have a special nickname for him?
I don't know, and if I did, I probably wouldn't tell you.
All right. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.